There we go. And we're being recorded. All right. So the goal, or my goal here at least, was to try to come up with some tools that people may have heard of, haven't heard of, haven't had a chance to try, kind of get a chance to evangelize the stuff that you like, the stuff that you don't like, look for new tools to try. I'm actually on my project right now. I'm in a good spot where I'm able to play with a lot of new tools and just suggest anything that I think should belong in a pipeline. It's kind of a nice situation for somebody who likes to play with new tools all the time. So that's what I was hoping to get out of it. On the idea boards, I was really just trying to get some conversations started and have some tools to talk about. But since we have Stephen here, if it's okay with everyone, just why don't you tell us a little bit about muse.dev, and we'll get it started there.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so what we try and do is make it much sort of lower friction for developers to use static analysis in particular. So we have a platform that incorporates a variety of static analysis tools, open source tools, as well as some technology that we've been developing, and handles, basically integrates with the GitHub pull request system. So you submit a pull request, kicks off analysis with a variety of tools, sort of depending on what language mix is in there, finds the results and highlights results that relate to that particular code change as code review comments. So really participates in the code review process alongside team members. We think of this as the optimal place to make sure that results get surfaced. And we think that, but it's actually largely based on some research that Google and Facebook did in terms of how they rolled out static analysis tools, things they tried, things that worked, things that didn't. And so we've adopted a lot of those best practices and just tried to package it up into a very easy to use service. So like the GitHub integration, it's a GitHub app, you can just install it, and it's usually one click. We auto detect build and language support and everything. And then, that's the easiest way to get started. Then obviously there's on-prem is a big deal in software development. A lot of organizations, especially larger enterprises, tend to run their own servers, whether it's Bitbucket, GitLab, or GitHub Enterprise. And so we integrate with those too. And that product's still in private beta, but we're working with companies, early adopters on that. So, I imagine all of you know about all the corners of, all the various pipelines, hybrid cloud, on-prem cloud, all of that. But we try to cover as much as that as we can, sort of being an early stage startup.
So what makes it different than something like Codacy or Code Climate or?
So we, someone mentioned there weren't a lot of security-oriented tools. So we focus much more on security and deep security analysis in particular. So things like cross-site scripting, command injection, sort of these attack types that really require understanding not just a local piece of code, but like how various pieces of code relate, right? And how data flows through the application. And so those sorts of things that you'd see more often from like a Checkmarx or Fortify, but running in a way that integrates into the code review process and gets you results much faster. That's sort of our sweet spot.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody?
How's that compared? Didn't GitHub just release a thing where they're scanning code with something related to SEML?
Yeah, that's right. They bought SEML, and and they've integrated it. And there's a new code review. There's a new security dashboard UI element in GitHub. So like there's a security tab now on your repos, and we actually integrate with that. So if you're running MuseDev, we'll push all our results to that security tab as well. SEML's great. SEML covers a lot of things that are interesting and worth checking for. We provide coverage in the security space, sort of somewhat overlapping with SEML, but also going broader. So we focus not just on security, but also performance and reliability. I mean, I think one thing, like we're trying to take the QA security vetting process and make it less of a sort of back and forth between a security team and a dev team, where there's sort of like a team blocking release that has to do their own scans, and then the developer team, trying to make it more of an automated process and bringing sort of CI and CD elements and DevOps elements into that. And so what we find is, developers care about security a lot more than people give them credit for, but also they care about performance and reliability. No one wants to get paged in the middle of the night because the site went down or something. And so, yeah, we try and cover that whole space. So that's the difference there.
So if I'm trying to decide between using your product or using something like Fortify or Checkmarks, well, why should I pick yours?
Yeah, so I think it's the fact that we go broader than just security. We have some technology we're incorporating now. So in the next few months, we'll be launching some new features that address the false positive rate, which is always sort of everyone's biggest complaint about static analysis is false positives. And then just setup integration, ease of use, and sort of the fact that we really focus on getting results in front of developers using tools they're already using. We don't want to pull anyone into like yet another separate web UI dashboard thing that they have to check as part of their release process, right? So, yeah, that'd be my answer.
How do you respond to people when they say like, well, you should just skip SaaS tools and do something like DAST or IAST and get more information about what's actually going on?
Yeah, I mean, they're all valuable. There's things that are much easier to detect in a DAST context. Certainly, you get often sort of better ground truth from a DAST perspective, but there's bug categories that are better checked using static analysis. So like one that we see a lot of interest in is thread safety errors. So this is not a security issue, but it's a common sort of issue with reliability and just correctness that comes up where you have multi-threaded code and you've missed something. You say it's a Java application, you have some piece of code that should be synchronized that's not, and so you're not providing the thread safety you think you are. And like those sorts of errors, even when you know it's occurring, like you've seen it misbehave, like it's so hard to reproduce and go in and debug. And static analysis is really the right way to address those sorts of errors. So there's a set of errors that are sort of in that class where it's better dealt with on the static side. Yeah. Do you use like Checkmarks or Coverity or any of the DAST tools or anything?
So I've used all kinds of different security tools. So, I'm familiar with a lot of them, and I agree false positives are the bane of SaaS tool existence.
Yeah.
DAST has some nice features, but you're right, it doesn't really have context into what's going on inside. Have you all compared yourselves to like findings with IaaS tools like Contrast Security or anything?
Yeah, we haven't done those sort of comparative studies yet. But yeah, we're certainly looking to do some of those as case studies with our early users.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And I'll, since we have this awful like Zoom bomber, I'll replace some of the chat with a link to the website if people want to go check it out.
Any other questions for Stephen or any other types of tools that you might use in that space?
I mean, SonarQube is the one we get compared to the most. So I see it in a couple of categories. I'm curious about people's experiences there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead, Max.
Oh, I'd say I love SonarQube, but recently I've started using, there's a few really cool GitHub integration tools that will do that. Some of them that are starting to use machine learning to kind of automatically pull some of that information in there. And I'm trying to remember exactly what the name is. So give me just a sec, because I'm just looking at my GitHub files actually.
Cool.
One of them that I like, assuming that is Deep Code. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Deep Code is interesting. My main complaint is none of that is, one of the things that you said, and that's what I like, is you don't have to go to other places. Deep Code kind of, you have to go visit their own site. If you actually want to find out any of the information for it, which it's not that painful. It's another click away. But it definitely doesn't integrate as closely as like SonarQube does, for example, into the GitHub pull request.
Yeah. That's interesting. So yeah, I know about Deep Code. I talked to those guys, know them from our days as academics. So we overlapped, and that's cool to hear that you're trying that out. I think it's an interesting approach to code analysis, and certainly machine learning helps catch certain types of errors. And
yeah, it's not,
you know,
it definitely doesn't catch as much as even SonarCube does. But
yeah,
you know, it's another interesting. Again, if I have another 10 seconds, I don't mind throwing some additional tools at them, at least
right,
for my own pipelines. Yeah. Code Factor is
yeah.
another one that I've tried. Haven't been a huge fan of that.
Code Factor, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, I find it really amazing how different tools tend to catch different types of errors. You know, like you mentioned, SonarCube versus Deep Code. You know, Deep Code doesn't catch as much, but maybe it catches something SonarCube doesn't. And, you know, all these tools, like, it's remarkable that the disjointness of the result sets. And that's a big part of why we run more than one tool. Like, we sort of focus first on building a platform where you can integrate lots of different tools and sort of bring all the results together. Because like, especially when you're going even in the security space, you know, it helps to run multiple tools, but certainly when you go more broad than just security, like, you know, there's no one tool that covers it all.
Yeah, I'm always tempted to run, like, you know, as many of the static code analysis and linters and security
Yeah.
tools as I can find, but I've been a couple places where they took that approach for security tools in particular and security agents on boxes, and it's just not. It has shown me that how badly that can go to, you know, systems that were ground to a halt because they're using up almost all their RAM just on the security agents that have to run to keep things secure. It's like, well, you're already doing the hacker's job for them, right? Someone gets in,
right,
not a service, you're already taking care of it.
Yeah, and if the security team goes too far in that direction from a code analysis perspective, then, you know, suddenly you're getting, like, for every release, hundreds of issues that you have to address, and, like, you know, either they end up getting ignored, and then why are you even running the tools to begin with, or like someone has to handle them all or triage them all because that's the policy, and then things slow down, and it's like, yeah, you gotta have a middle ground there.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so I will say I like Max, I used a lot of SonarCube. The big part I think for me is the dashboarding. It's nice to get all that feedback for the on the static analysis tools for the developers, but frankly, I can pipe most of those right into the IDE, even without SonarLint. But the big thing is I can show it to a project manager or somebody and be able to say, hey, look, we're getting better, right? Now there's all sorts of problems in trying to show them the results because, you know, hey, this 200 line application has, you know, 5 findings, but this, you know, 200,000 line one has 1,000 findings. Why are they so much worse? It's like, well, they're not.
Right.
You know, you can't compare them like that.
I find it interesting though, because no real Scotsman AppSec people will tell you that SonarCube is horrible for security.
Yes. Yeah, but at least it's, you know, I mean, it's good feedback for developers, period, right? It has some stuff in it that shows up for security, but for the most part, it's, you know, it's feedback. And
as I tell people, if you're doing nothing, it's better than nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you have it there and you can just turn on the security rules, you'll be better off than if you don't do that.
And you can find the obvious, you know, creating a SQL statement by adding a bunch of strings together, or I'm going ahead and I have a race condition because these things should be synchronized, or, you know, some of those that are, you know, they are problems. Whether or not they're going to show up in a security scan or not, I don't know, but they're definitely, you know, things that need to get fixed that could have security implications. So
I think of it as more like a code quality tool, but like code quality contributes to security, right? You know, if you have cleaner code, better, easier to understand, easier to read code, you know, that helps with the human review process, which is where a lot of security issues get caught too.
I thought I'd give a quick 2 cents on the developer and process. Like I've used SonarCube, and I much prefer to have that stuff closer to the build. Like having it out on a server and having to integrate, like, it's fine. You can have that as part of your Gradle build and all that, right? But I find it's usually more effective. It keeps people in line better if you like using like find bugs and PMD locally, so you don't have the server involved and all that. And if it's like built into your CI build and built into the local build, then you have it set up this way, developers don't even have the opportunity to merge code that have like these kind of low level quality issues.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, the main reason we sit in code review instead of like on the developer's box is just there's some sort of there's some bug types that benefit from a deeper sort of longer analysis of the code. And so if you're on that, like, taking 10 minutes to analyze the code time frame instead of milliseconds, then it's no one wants their laptop fan running all the time. But yeah, it also just helps centralize management and keeping everything up to date and, rule sets current and everything. But yeah. I'm curious, Gene, if you've mentioned SonarQube's dashboard, what's your favorite graph or view or whatever from there?
It used to be the hotspots, because I find it was a great way to look up, like, hey, there's some place that really needs some care and attention, this class, if I just spend a little bit of time on it. But yeah, most of the time now it's just watching for bigger trends. And I'm lately my gigs have all been less responsible for the code and more responsible for the pipeline. So it's more about just being able to show people that there's a trend, right? The trending in the right direction. Don't look at the absolute numbers. Look at the fact that they're getting better,
Yeah. One thing I've heard people talk about is like sort of a get clean, stay clean distinction, right? You add a new tool and you have a bunch of findings, that are already there, right? And, you want to work those down over time as the opportunity arises. But you also want to make sure new issues of that type don't come into the code base. And there's sort of different concerns that lend themselves to different workflows and work cadences.
Yeah. Tom and I, well, actually, and Max at one point as well, all worked on a project that was infamously bad about their code quality and well, just
You
They
could
were
have stopped that
infamously bad about
infamous-
everything.
about everything. So yeah, we did a lot of work over the years with them to do let's improve the code quality. Let's look at getting better. Let's pick a single type of problem and fix it across the board, or at least improve it across the board. And a lot of the developers, it was huge, and a lot of the developers were only capable of fixing one type of problem at a time. They could not be bothered with, let's just clean stuff up in general. So
yeah, it's hard to organize those things and find the time and space to work down that technical debt. That's always a struggle, whether it's security, SAST findings or other sorts of technical debt. It's hard to carve out the time.
yes. Yeah. So, and the other thing for me for SonarQube is, we mentioned earlier, is that it can be installed on-prem, right? I do mostly federal contracting. That means it's got to live in their enclave. Can't be sending code out. Can't be reaching out. In some cases, can't even reach out to the internet, period. So there's just no option. So for my own stuff, I like playing on GitHub and just, being able to plug something in and run an analysis. But, for work, it's almost always has to be something I can bring in and install.
Yeah. And how much time, I'm curious, when you go into a new place and you have your set of tools that you want to recommend and sort of get set up in this environment, how much time do you generally spend just learning about their build environment, their execution environment, and getting things set up, right?
Not near as much time as I spend waiting for them to give me access. That's really what it comes down to. By the time I get access, I've almost always run out of questions to ask them and done all the diagramming and read out all the documentation I can.
Yeah. But then the setup process takes time, right? Like getting everything running, integrated testing.
Yeah. So we try, I mean, we have lots of sample code that we try to, bring in or show them here, we built this pipeline based on the things you talked about out in our AWS cloud. You can see it's running here, we can recreate it, but it's going to take us time to move it over. And as soon as you can somehow get us onto your network, we'll start reinventing it on your network with whatever, restrictions you put on it. But that ends up being the problem I have most of the time.
Yeah. No, this is interesting to me because like this, we have an on-prem version as well, and we're working with, some large companies to like use it, deploy it, try it out. And like, that, like you said, what unique restrictions will there be in this environment, and how will we have to work around them is always the question of the day.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, cool.
Anybody else have a tool they want to bring up, or we want to start talking about different categories, or? All right. Go ahead.
I have a question, Gene. And I mean, we see at least some government organizations have started adopting, whether it's a cloud data center dedicated to the government, or some of the, let's pull the cloud into our data center. Are those enclaved data centers catching on to that technology, or are they still laggards at this point? That sounds like laggards to me.
Yeah.
Hesitation means laggards.
Yeah, it's last project I was on, we were completely cut off from the internet. Had no internet access. Anything that you wanted to put onto their section of, in this case it was Azure Gov, we need to download to our laptop and then upload through a series of different spots where we could drop it finally into a Nexus repo that lived on their network and then pull it down from there. So it was, multiple hops every direction to get stuff on, and it couldn't reach out. There were very few exceptions to it. Like we could reach out to Maven Central. But that was pretty much it. My current project, I'm not really sure. We're not on network yet, and they're telling us they can get out, but what that means, who knows? Is it just proxied? Is it blocked and we have to jump through hoops? Is it, I don't know.
Fair enough.
All right. How about we pick one of the categories here? Looking up at the board up on over my shoulder here. How about the I wish I had? Anybody got an I wish I had that looks like the winner there? Software supply chain visibility and security. Anybody want to talk to that one or offer suggestions for that? I know for me, we've used Nexus IQ server before, Sonatype Nexus IQ, which will do basically SCA, software composition analysis on any tools you're bringing in, and tie it through Nexus repo. Then anything gets pulled from Nexus repo gets checked against constantly updated lists of CVEs and their own Sonatype's own thing. It's a lot like some of the open source OS dependency check and OS dependency track. I think just about every tool we've looked into recently with for security has some sort of SCA component to it. So anybody else got any suggestions for that? Software supply chain security?
I just want to make the comment that I think that that's probably have the biggest impact to a lot of security. If we look at the way at least public companies are being compromised on the internet, it's now often through their dependencies some of which they don't even know they have. And so being able to put some kind of restrictions on that, particularly around security, is important. We had one customer that they claimed that they had 300 approved external libraries to use for their enterprise. Their enterprise Nexus repo had over 4,000 different libraries. And so there was a big disconnect between what they thought they were using and what they were really using.
Yeah, a lot of the tools that we run tend to be eye openers for the maybe not management, but certainly for the people, the architects or the people planning out the projects, or the people that are sure they've locked it down. So I do know there was a project where, because we were using Nexus, maybe the one you were talking about, because of the way we were using Nexus, they were convinced that nothing that they hadn't already put there they hadn't already put onto Nexus was not going to, that nothing else would get in there without realizing that, hey, it proxies. So if you ask for something that's not there, it just comes down.
Yeah, that was not the same project, but that is a common problem.
Yes.
They don't actually really know how they've configured their tools in some cases.
Right. Yeah, you have to run not just the right tool, but have your policies, have the right policies in place, right? If you're not restricted, yeah.
At some real level, that practice of pulling down something and then putting it into the repo that you had to do by their policy is actually a big security hole.
Yes.
That is almost crazy.
Yeah. Safer to trust Maven Central is going to have the right stuff and not be
Yeah. So.
Anyone else? Software supply chain visibility, security. All right. How about loved by managers? Any tools that managers love to see or love to use or love to say they have?
I think the biggest thing is reports and dashboards. Those are loved by managers and executives. And
That's the best answer there.
There's the big trend now to have what they call one pane of glass. So one tool to rule them all.
I do know that security-wise, Fortify in the government space tends to be the big winner. And we want to have it, and we want it to run. That's usually as far as it gets. A couple places I've been actually do anything with the reports, or in some cases even let the developers see the reports. That's another good one. They'll run it, but developers can't see the results.
I mean, Gene, I was working with one client where they spent a whole bunch on their Fortify licenses. And so they had it, so they were meeting that checkbox, but that was it. No one had really figured out how to make it run properly or do anything beyond that. But they had the licenses, and that was, satisfying a huge requirement there.
Just to be clear, if you have Fortify, you paid a lot for the licenses. They don't give anything away.
I mean, just that apparently was a big enough win for them.
Well, I mean, I had it and wish I had good AppSec practices, and I think that's a perfect example of once we can check the box, we are done with it, no matter what that means. The box has been checked. I can move on.
Yeah.
And maybe that's another thing loved by managers. We've checked the box and I can move on.
I'm curious if anyone has experience with the sort of compliance side of these government requirements. So like box checking makes me think of like, oh, we have to get pass this certification authority, or we have to get, approval to use this in this environment, and like the disconnect that's often there between actual security concerns versus going through the motions. Like as you set up DevOps pipelines and install tooling and stuff, to what extent is the conversation about improving the code and things like that versus like, well, this authority has to sign off on it at the end of the day, and so we have to make sure we're asserting X, Y, and Z.
I would say in most cases, it gets down to this is what the authority said we need, which is why you have that box checking. Right. There are a few places that I've worked at least, where the thing that brought the security tools in was concern of code quality or concern of security reasons. There's almost always, this is another hurdle that was put in place by the people who need to approve of us. I'm sure, Max, you have a great example of a time when people brought in a security tool just because they wanted to improve the security of their application.
Well, a lot of my experience recently has been people bringing in tools because something bad happened, as opposed to and they need to improve security, as opposed to anything else, which is really unfortunate.
I generally find when that's the case too, they after some period of time where they feel the heat's off, their concern about security goes back away.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly accurate description of what I've seen as well. Not an issue anymore. Why do we need to think about it anymore? Which is not really the right way to be thinking about it.
Or it's a solved problem, right? We fix the security. That's it, right? We don't need to check it again. That's done.
We added this tool to the pipeline, so now it's forever more taken care of.
Yep. Let's see. Sorry, my basement got very loud there for a second. I needed to get the headset on. First one didn't seem to work. How about, let's see what else we got here. Worth paying for. What's a tool that's worth paying for in the pipeline that you find? Anything, Eric, DK, any ideas?
Oh, I put New Relic APM on the board for it. I had some experience with it. Rack, of course, a bunch of other APM tools potentially. But I think you need to have some sort of good way of monitoring what's going on in production, basically.
Any other ones?
Yeah, I'll add, if we're talking about production, we use Logly for collecting, log data, persisting that, facilitating querying when things go wrong, figure out what the root cause is. It's been pretty valuable.
I know we have used SonarQube Developer Edition. Pay for the developer license just because it gets you the branching and the GitHub or GitHub Enterprise decoration, right? Like you said, for putting the issues right in there. But the big one is just the overhead of setting up some sort of kludge to get the branching handled without using developer. It's just not worth it. You can get someone to pay. It's easier.
So you get the sort of reports and dashboards you talked about, you get those on a per branch basis then?
Yeah, and when you make a branch, it handles basically it handles its SonarQube the branching just like it would in a multi-branch pipeline in Jenkins, where it creates the branch. It knows it's part of the same project. You don't have to do anything to look at the trending. By putting up 2 screens and kind of figuring it out for yourself. It actually can track it from the main branch. One of the other things it does is sets the what do they call it? The something period. It's not test period. I forget what the term they use is, but basically you can look at the trend over time of any change, but it will look, and SonarQube will start that time frame, not date based, but at the beginning of the branch by default.
Yeah.
So you can see just like, how much crap have you introduced on this branch, or how much have you fixed on this branch, not what have you done in the last 7 days or something like that.
That's nice. I guess it helps keep other people's garbage out of your analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for when you want to, take the Boy Scout approach of, hey, I'm not making it worse. I'm cleaning it up a little bit as I go along, which in a lot of places that we've been is, best you can hope for. Just don't make things worse.
I mean, honestly, I think that's maybe you shouldn't only hope for not making things worse, but I think it's really the most realistic approach, which is kind of clean up as you go and refactor. Don't do this huge, everyone stop developing and let's only focus on fixing all of our code. I mean, I can't really see too many places where that's practical.
Yeah, or effective.
Yeah.
I've seen, for different areas of concern, lots of places where they tried to do everyone stop and focus on this. And that lasts somewhere between an hour and 2 weeks, depending on how desperate your business is to get some new feature in.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. How about one-trick ponies? Anybody got a tool or something that only does one little thing? I know one of the ones I threw in was equals verifier. It's a package I put into all my Java projects that all it does is help run JUnit tests to make sure that your objects are actually equals. Equals and hash code actually work out according to the Java spec, which is a lot tougher than it looks.
Yeah. We have some rules in that space that fire a lot on various projects. Yeah, it's remarkable how often people override one and not the other.
Yep. I actually the test program I've actually just ran muse.dev on it just now. The test Java app that I have that just does hierarchy. It's just shapes, like a quadrilateral is a rectangle is a quadrilateral, a square is a rectangle, and stuff like that. Just getting that built so that it meets equals and hash code took me like a whole weekend. It was so simple, you would have thought, but I was actually trying to see if I could get that to do it the right way without overriding anything, and it taught me a lot about Java that I was a little bit embarrassed to say didn't get right off.
Yeah. And those are like, there's a few things in that space where it's like, maybe it's not right, currently, but no one uses hash code. So, maybe it doesn't matter right now. And like, you have to like make the point that like, but more code will be written in the future and people might start using that functionality. And when it doesn't work how you expect, that, then no one knows what's going on.
Yeah. So you're one of 12 people who understand that part of Java now.
Yeah, on my Java projects, I tend to eliminate this problem entirely. Actually, using Lombok. Have you guys heard of using Lombok? Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't imagine starting a new Java project without using Lombok. So Lombok eliminates all of this scaffolding, getters, setters, equals, hash code, all that crap. Essentially, it does it for you, which also reduces the size of the code base dramatically. So anyway, but what I wanted to mention, so I put in on this one-trick pony space, I put Jenkins performance and float plugins. So it was me. So essentially, the two similar plugins, but what we do, so the goal is to build the graphs automatically, which shows you different measures from build to build, right? So you can see the trends, and what's very important, especially if you integrate some sort of performance testing in the pipeline, and somebody makes a change and performance goes down dramatically, those sort of things. So we allow you to catch us early, right? Shifting left. So the difference is the performance plugins essentially draws performance-related graphs, getting data from different tools, from JMeter, JUnit, Torus, all sort of load testing tools. Whereas Plot just can build any graph. You just feed raw data into Plot, and it will build the graph for you automatically. I use it to draw sort of raw TPS numbers, transactions per second from Postgres benchmarking. So you could just feed any data potentially into Plot, and it will build it for you.
So with the performance plugin, how do you normally drive it? Do you just use Gatling or JMeter or something like that?
JMeter. Yeah, I tend to use JMeter, but it supports a bunch of tools. But yeah. So you have JMeter project, and you know, performance test periodically, nightly, or in continuous integration, and it builds a trend for you from build to build.
Okay. Interesting. Any other plugins people use in Jenkins? Does everyone here at some point, I'm sure, has used Jenkins? Any other plugins for Jenkins that people find indispensable? Or
I mean, I love the Zap plugin for Jenkins, and it's probably just because I'm lazy, but it is an absolute pain to configure Zap properly, especially if you're using Docker for your app in order to kind of get it to run either in daemon or in any of the other more active modes, and then still be able to get all the results. So for me, that's kind of something that I just kind of have to have if I'm going to be doing any sort of app analysis. That said, I'd also say that Zap is probably one of those must-have tools that I think is really underutilized for security in the pipeline.
yeah,
Or,
I mean,
or Burp or anything else, but some sort of proxy network scanner.
yeah, we've you and I have talked about it before and been on projects where we pitch those that, it's so easy to get started with just Zap just because it's something, again, back to Tom's comment about if you're doing something, you're already doing more than most people. And Zap's a good one. I mean, I actually think Zap, just because you can teach a developer to use it to actually do some security scanning, to do some security proxying, that right there puts it ahead of a lot of tools, even if it doesn't catch as much or whatever. Getting a developer to do something that's out of their wheelhouse is, sometimes difficult to get them to build that in. And you let Zap proxy for a little while, and then you hit the big green button that says, hey, try to attack it now. And, hey, what do you know? You found a bunch of security problems.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with the attack, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why you have disposable infrastructure, right?
Well, you gotta be careful on Amazon. Depending on how you're doing the attack, they can flag.
Yes, actually, that's a good
Flag you
point
for that, actually.
Yeah, can't imagine that ever happening. Oh wait.
No, I'm certain I've never done that before. Pissed off one of my clients. No.
Yeah, or on our own website.
I don't know if I ever did that to Coveros's website.
That wasn't
possible.
I did it to Coveros's website.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. You weren't the only one though.
No, no.
It was done several times through the years.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the future where it happens.
Yep. All right. How about Eric? You got any good tools for us?
Surprised Terraform's not on the must-have tool list. So infrastructure as code. I mean, it's sort of, you know, platform agnostic, kind of like CloudFormation stuff. But that's a gotta have. Got my head very much in Kubernetes space these days. Everything is, you know, very Kubernetes specific that I think of now. That's the only one that really jumps out.
Yeah, I haven't played much with Terraform. It's something I'm just learning now. It is something we're going to be using on this project. But I do know that it's a big one for people on job searches, and people, you know, seem to be every DevOps position now seems to be looking for somebody that has some experience with Terraform. So.
And from a code scanning perspective, infrastructure as code is all the rage too. Comes up all the time. Yeah.
We actually we set up a demo pipeline for our current client who is using, like I said, Terraform. And one of the things they wanted us to check out, there was a tool called Checkoff that actually will scan Terraform, CloudFormation templates, ARM templates, and Kubernetes files, and just does static code analysis on it. You know, just best practices, little bit more than a linter, not a whole lot more.
So we just added checkoff to Muse last week. It's funny that you mention it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Any other tools in that space that you like?
Yeah, that's the only one I've played with extensively. I know there's a couple of other companies in this space. Fugue is one, and there's another competitor. Sort of Bridge Crew makes checkoff. Fugue as sort of their own tool, and there's a third company in that space too, but I'm blanking on the name.
Okay.
Well, and relatedly, there's Twistlock, which is, you know, if you're going to be doing stuff with your containers, I feel like you got to be including that.
Yeah. The our current client is not using, or is using Twistlock, but they are moving off to, what's the other tool? I have it written down here. Hang on. Not there. Where do I have it? Literally just had it up on the screen. I'm curious if anybody else has experience with it. So, nah, I'll find it. I'll find it as soon as I give up looking for it. That's what I'll do. Oh, I do not see it.
Well, Gene, as you said, the sooner you give up looking for it, the sooner you'll find it.
That is true.
At least I'm pretty sure that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, Stack Rocks. There it is.
Stack
Rocks.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. I watched it. It was a very quick demo of it they gave in a webinar this week, and it was yeah, I mean, it was a demo in 20 minutes, and of course it solves every security problem known to man. I didn't get enough out of it to figure out how to use it. It was more of a sales pitch, which, you know, didn't interest me as much because the client already has bought it. And I'm just trying to figure out how to throw it into the pipeline, but it sounded good, you know. And the client obviously has some problem with Twistlock, that they like this more. So We'll have to see what that amounts to, but no one has experience with it. Stack Rocks. Nope. How about what are the other ones like Twistlock? There's Aqua. Anybody use that one? That has come up in a bunch of searches. I don't think we met anybody that used that one.
Yeah.
All right.
No, and from a container scanning perspective, I know SNCC sort of has an offering in that space. Or has anyone seen uptake of that in the government space? It seems to be sort of more in the cloud and tech sector right now.
See a lot of T-shirts at conferences back when we had conferences from SNCC, but that was about it.
Yeah.
All right. How about behind the scenes? Anybody got any good tools that they use for DevSecOps that nobody ever sees?
So I'll give you an interesting take on behind the scenes. Going back to Zap, one of my big things that I really like to push is having it run behind the scenes on your pipeline. So that any tests you run, your API tests, your functional tests, even your performance tests are all proxying through, and whether that's Burp or anything else. And then you just kind of get a report at the absolute end of that. It's, kind of similar to what I mentioned before, but in my mind, it's very much a behind the scenes aspect of it, of just something you add to your pipeline with no additional overhead, and you just get extra information out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a separate stage on its own. It's not a separate task you're taking. It's
Yep, exactly.
So why don't people do that?
Tom, if I had to answer for that, I wouldn't be here. I'd have billions of dollars and be up on a beach somewhere. Why people don't do very easy things to make their lives easier is absolutely beyond me.
Yes, you're literally talking to someone whose Twitter handle is automate tests, and he still has to fight that battle.
It's very difficult to do, so why would I bother doing that?
Speaking of automate tests, and I see good test automation in there. Serenity. First, I've been playing around a lot with Serenity BDD. Another Serenity JS, which should be a lot easier because it's JavaScript rather than Java. So it gives you like a domain-specific language to express tests. It's like wrapping Selenium WebDriver kind of stuff. Still, you need to write the test well and do the programming right, but I think it's a higher level set of constructs for automated testing, and it gives good reports too.
And does it compete with Selenium, or is it more like Cucumber?
It's a tool that uses Selenium, so it's like I say, it gives a domain-specific language to express making user interface interactions and REST calls and things like that.
My understanding is it's a lot more like Protractor than.
Yeah, I'm not
yeah, if you want to take Cucumber, right? But yeah, it's much more of a framework for managing it and then doing the actual implementation.
Right.
Okay. Cool. All right. So one of the tools that I have been playing with a lot lately, that actually I'd heard about a while back, but just started playing with this week, was pre-commit.com, which actually I've been really, really happy with lately. It's literally this week. But it lets you, it's a framework for setting up pre-commit hooks client side. And you throw a configuration file, it gets checked into Git, and then you can set it up to run, checking for syntax, mostly linters and stuff, but they will do some formatting and stuff too. So one of the things you can do is reformat code. Any code that you change, any files that you change can reformat them to say Google's code standard, right? And if you commit and it actually makes a change, it'll fail the commit. You have to recommit again, presumably after looking at the changes and making sure they're okay. It can do things, simple things like make sure there's a carriage return or a line feed at the end of every file. Make sure that the line feed carriage returns are consistent through a file. Remove a byte order remark.
Can it do things like add like last updated or kind of make sure the metadata is all accurate?
It probably could. I didn't see any pre-built, but it's really just a Python framework that can run any other Python or Docker image or anything. So one of the things it did, set it up to run checkoff. If you commit, have it. We've been recently updating a bunch of documentation in Markdown. So we just added yesterday a Markdown linter that runs out of a Docker container. So if you change a Markdown file and go to commit it, it will make sure it's meeting style guidelines.
That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah. The neat thing about it, to me, at least for now, is that it's opt-in. You can check the code in, but if another developer does not have pre-commit installed, they have to take an action to turn it on for their repo. It's just once. But once they turn it on, it gets all the configured pre-commit hooks installed for them. So
what is the install process?
it's a Python
Like another.
app. You literally you have to have the pre-commit app, so it's just pip install pre-commit. But then in the repo, you just type pre-commit install, and it picks up whatever hooks and sets them up for you.
Oh, okay.
On the client
Okay.
side. So, and then from then on, it picks up any changes they get or anything. It's just literally you turn it on a repository by repository local setup, because you're generally speaking, a client side Git hook is not stored with the repository.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So, like I said, most of it's been linters so far, but it's kind of the ultimate in shifting some of the simple stuff left.
Yeah.
So it's really simple stuff, style guidelines pretty much more than anything. Sorry, I got distracted. I got an email from muse.dev.
Yeah. I noticed one of our engineering team saw that you needed a config filing. Was hopefully contributing it.
Yes. Yeah, it's an old repo. I was trying to get one that had problems, and it does have problems. Yeah. I scanned a clean one that doesn't have problems, and it didn't find anything. So unfortunately.
Okay.
So, that's no fun.
I got plenty of repos with problem code if you're in need of any.
Yeah, I just have to find one that actually runs that I could see something that's real, the one I picked.
That's true. I may have some that have so many problems, nothing will even run.
Yeah, that's what this one was. It's a JDK. It needed JDK 8, I guess 11. Was the way it was configured, and should be 11. So I'll play with that.
Yeah,
get that working. Cool. All right. Let's see if we can do one more. What haven't we done? Kind of did hidden gems already. The piece that Max was mentioning is for behind the scenes as well. That kind of the underrated OWASP dependency, OWASP Zap on the back end is a great one. I throw in. I love talking about mutation testing tools.
Yeah.
Just because it makes my life easier. Having dealt with a lot of legacy code, a lot of really, really, really bad legacy code.
No.
Trying to figure out like what actually is and isn't tested. Mutation testing, if you're not familiar with it, it actually just after you run your unit tests, it takes a copy of the source code and modifies it to break it somehow, and then reruns the unit tests. And if the unit tests still pass, then you know that was a condition that wasn't tested. So it'll change a not null to a null, or a greater than to a less than, or a less than to a less than equals, and just sees if it can get through, right? So it's looking for conditions that you thought you were checking or but weren't. And it's really a good response to teams that are very, very focused on code coverage, but not at all focused on actually testing anything with that code.
Yeah. I love it. I haven't heard that much about mutation testing getting sort of widespread usage, so it's cool to hear you talk about it. Yeah.
Only old developers use it.
It's a cool technique, though. Do you incorporate it into the pipeline, or is this just something you run periodically to give people a sanity check about what they're actually testing?
That's usually the way I use it, or more often because I'm about to change some legacy code that has no visible unit tests, or say questionable amount of unit tests. And you know, depending on how bad the code is, especially if it's really, really bad, one of the things, you know, you like to have is some unit tests to know that when you start breaking it apart and refactoring, you're not actually changing behavior. Of course, usually the reason you're doing that is because there's no unit tests around it, because you don't know what the behavior is. So trying to go through the chicken and egg of, I need to change it to be testable, and I need it tests around it before I want to change it. The mutation testing tends to be a good way to work that in.
We did that on the functional side of testing on a project I was at, kind of briefly, almost as an experiment. Not in the main pipeline, but in the test pipeline. So we basically ran our tests first to say, hey, look, everything passes with their code, we should be good to push. And what we did is we ran mutation tests. Essentially it was running mutation tests over our actual tests, and any of our tests that failed them, we ended up removing, because clearly they were, well, I guess technically the test still passed, but if they failed the mutation by passing, then we basically said, these are problematic tests. There's no point in running them. And so we used that kind of as a way to cull down and flag bad tests that we had.
Yeah, one of the well, famous on our project problems we had to solve was a 2,000 line Java private static void method in the middle of a class that needed to be broken down. So it's nothing but side effects, you know, definitely problems with threading and everything else. And we had no idea what the whole thing did. It was literally 2,000 lines. Just use that to start breaking out pieces and keep running the mutation test over and over on, you know, I see a safe, you know, 20 line section I can pull out, and I can actually try to see if any of the tests touch it, and can I really get to it? Is there some way to break stuff the right way? So.
Wow. That's crazy. You succeeded, though.
Yeah, the 2,000 lines were no longer there. They were at least broken up into multiple pieces. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had kept a copy of that. That would have been a good one. But just knowing it was there at one point.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're hitting 8 o'clock. Anybody else got any other tools they want to mention? You know, Max just dropped, and looks like Tom's dropping, so that's good. Why don't, anybody else have anything else? And otherwise, we'll call it here. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for showing up, and thanks for the discussion. It was great. I will continue to play with muse.dev. Good luck.
Thanks. And yeah, if you have feedback, let me know.
Sure.
I'll connect. I found you on LinkedIn, so I'll send you an invite, and
Oh, absolutely.
I'll look for everyone else too. Yeah.
Great meeting you, and Eric, great meeting you as well. DK, it was nice seeing you again. Thanks for your input earlier.
Sure.
Appreciate it. And I guess I'll see you guys. Hopefully, this is our last meetup for this year. We're going to skip next month, but we'll be back hopefully in January, February, and start going again.
Well, you always announce it on the DC Tech Slack. Is there a mailing list too?
It's just on the meetup site, but yeah, I usually
Okay.
go into the DC Tech, Baltimore Tech. Try to get people, even though we're doing it virtual, we try to keep it fairly local with the idea that at some point we may actually
Yeah.
go back to being able to meet
Meeting
at
up.
meetups and
Yeah.
actually do this in person. We've never done this one in person. It started earlier in the year, so it's always been a
Oh,
virtual
cool.
meetup.
Cool. And I'm not on the Baltimore Slack, actually. I didn't realize there was a Baltimore Tech Slack too.
Yeah, I'll get you.
Well,
I'll get it to you if you just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll get you that Slack.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, great, Eric. Great meeting you,
All right.
Steven. Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
You too. All right.
Bye,
Nice
guys.
meeting you guys. See ya.